for a treat, and so am I. I'm so glad my next guest is here because I always love getting a chance to talk to prominent Republicans. Please give a warm late show welcome to the junior senator from Kentucky, Rand Paul. Nice to see you again.
I heard Republicans love to come on your show. You having trouble getting Republicans?
No, there are only a few we want to talk to. You're on the short list.
Good.
You and Ted Cruz, my two favorites. Now, it's good to have you back. Thanks for coming back. But before we talk about anything else, what can you tell us? What do you know about the terrible train wreck that happened today? GOP leadership, friends, family were on a train to go out to West Virginia for a retreat, and there was an accident and derailment, and one man was killed. What do you know about that?
You know, I know there were over 200 members of Congress on the train, senators and House members. I don't think any of them were seriously injured, but I think two members of the truck, at least one died and another seriously injured. And so it's a terrible accident, but I guess could have been worse had the train derailed. The train didn't actually derail, so I don't think there were any serious injuries on the train, other than the engineer. I take that back. The engineer was seriously injured.
And how do you, as one of the members of the GOP or someone in the Senate who wasn't on the trip, how do you find out about it? From the news, or is there, I don't mean to be facetious, but is there like a phone tree where important information like this is passed around the Senate first?
Well, I happened to be on a news station here in New York and heard about it, and I got ratted out because I was supposed to be at this thing, and I was skipping out to come watch a play in New York, and no one was supposed to know I was here. So I think I'm in trouble now for not being on the train. I was supposed to go to this conference.
They would have found out you were in New York tonight at 11:35.
Right, they would have.
All right, you got to learn how to be secretive better.
But I will tell you, there've been, you know, in the last year I've been involved in a lot of stuff. When I was at the shooting at the baseball park, and my wife found out about that on the news, or actually from a friend. A friend came banging on the door saying, he's not dead, you know, because it was so horrific, and people were finding out about it instantaneously on the news.
Yeah, you've had a hell of a year. Besides being at the tragic shooting at the softball field where Representative Scalise was shot, you also were attacked, you're assaulted, blindsided by a neighbor. I know you punctured a lung. Are you okay?
Been shot at, I've been mugged. I'm hoping 2018's a better year.
Yeah.
You know? So, you know, I am on the mend, but I found that there's sort of a secret society out there, and people come up to you and say, you know, I broke 3 ribs. Oh, I broke 2 ribs. People come up to you all the time, and they want to commiserate because it is pretty painful. So I've been through a lot, but I'm on the mend.
There are more fun ways to break ribs
yeah.
than to be assaulted by your neighbor.
Yeah.
Now, I know you've been asked many times, like, what this fight was about, and you don't want to talk about that. What was the fight about?
Well, the first thing I guess I would say is I wouldn't characterize it as a fight. I was attacked from behind with no warning.
You were blindsided, you had
I was wearing hearing protection, so didn't know it was coming. And hadn't spoken with him in a decade. So it really wasn't sort of a building, fuming thing where we had words. It was just sort of, I think he must have lost it, some kind of rage reaction. And, you know, and I'm really proud of my yard. How could someone be so mad about grass clippings, you know? But,
there was a report that maybe your little your clipping pile was too high, and that upset. How high was the clipping pile? Just you know, because if it was a fight over clipping piles or an attack over clipping piles, that is the most suburban white man thing I have ever heard.
Yeah, I think that we are channeling a lot of rage on both sides, politically and otherwise, grass clippings, you name it. We're unhappy with each other. And I think sometimes we see people on television and we think, that person's not human, they don't hurt, you know?
Right.
But I can say, look, I was human. So I guess a lot of people made light of the fact that I was attacked, but you know, I was very sick. I had pneumonia twice. I had trouble breathing at night. I really struggled for weeks and weeks to recover from this. But, you know, I don't know. I think there's a way that we ought to be able to have disagreements and figure out ways to get beyond it, if they're political disagreements or other. And I think we try to do some of that in Congress. It sort of gets lost in all the clutter of everything else we talk about. But there really is probably the unwritten story is that there's more discussions going across party lines than you would ever believe.
Well, here's something that you agree with some Democrats about, and I know you're at the State of the Union last night. I want to get to that in just a moment. But let's talk marijuana. for just a second. Would you describe yourself as a libertarian Republican?
Very much so, and I'm very much an advocate for freedom. I don't tell people what to do with their freedom, but as long as you're doing your freedom on your own time, you ought to be able to pretty much do what you want to do as long as you don't hurt somebody else.
So you're not opposed to legalization of marijuana?
No. In fact, I favor letting the states, make the decision. We've got about 28 states that have legalized medical marijuana. We now have half a dozen states that have legalized recreational marijuana. And really, the federal government ought to just stay out of it. I think people ought to be able to make these decisions. Adults should make decisions on what they do, what they drink, what they smoke.
Well, how do you feel? Then how do you feel about Jeff Sessions? Because Jeff Sessions is deeply opposed to the idea that states should make this decision themselves. And he is all for returning to prosecution of people who are selling or consuming marijuana in states where it's been legalized.
I think the best way to imagine is, you've heard sort of the response to a younger crowd. Imagine Congress and imagine some octogenarians that just watched Reefer Madness for the first time in 1937. Okay, they've just watched it on the old 8mm reels. They've just watched Reefer Madness. And they think it's the gateway to the end of the world, and so they think they should lock these people up.
Yeah,
but
you'll go insane. It's the jazz cigarettes.
Yeah, it's very expensive to lock people up, but it also ruins young people's lives. And one of my complaints about the war on drugs is that, 4 out of 5 people being arrested are black or brown. It's poor people. It's people that don't have the resources to get a good attorney that are getting arrested. Even though when you look at statistics, whites smoke marijuana just as much as black or Hispanic. And yet when you look at the prisons, they're full of Hispanics and African Americans, because we disproportionately arrest poor people. And there are disproportionately more poor people among minorities. But it's stark. You go to our prisons, and then when people get out, you can't vote again, you can't be hired again, you either go back to
Are you for people who have served their sentence to be allowed to vote?
Yes.
Okay.
And
That's good. Is that legal in Kentucky? Can they do that in Kentucky?
Kentucky's one of the worst states on this, but I have lobbied before the state legislature to give people back their right to vote. I actually co-sponsored a bill with Harry Reid, who I didn't always get along with, but I co-sponsored a bill with him to give back your federal right to vote after you've served your time. And I think that, it should be about second chances. Most of us, for religious reasons, believe that people have second chances. I think the law should give you a second chance. And really, if you look at the people in prison that are sort of making mistakes sometimes, they're making mistakes as young, mostly men, and mostly at a young age, and that'll be given a second chance.
And I legally, I agree. Legally, I have to ask you, are you high right now?
No, but they had like 3 bottles of vodka, and I usually don't drink before, but they said, go ahead and drink. They said you like
Back in the green room.
Yeah, they told me. They said that Stephen, he loves the guest to have a few drinks. So,
I love it when the senators are lubricated. I really do. We got to take a little break, but we're right back with more Senator Rand Paul. Everybody, stick around. Hey, everybody, we're back here with Senator Rand Paul. Okay, so you were at the State of the Union last night. I saw you clapping there. But when you were running against Donald Trump, you said Trump would be a terrible president. In that seat right there on this show, over 2 years ago, you said he's a blowhard who's unqualified to be the commander-in-chief, specifically because he didn't even know what the nuclear triad was. Now it's like stand up when he says nice things.
Here's the thing, Stephen. I'm going to let you in on a secret, okay?
Sure.
So every time I was stood up last night and I was clapping for myself. That was me clapping for myself.
Okay.
So I think you've misinterpreted that whole clap thing.
Okay, well, you should, because the president has claimed a lot of success this year. Let's say the tax cut, or getting his Supreme Court nominee past the Senate, but the Congress did all those things.
Right.
I mean, any Republican, just a Republican head on a stick would have gotten the same thing out of the Republican Congress, wouldn't they?
I would disagree, and I would push back a little bit, because I would say Bush wouldn't have given us a tax cut. He would have given you some kind of tax shifting proposal, and we wouldn't have cut taxes. We did dramatically cut taxes. Everybody in the country who makes $75,000 or less is going to pay less in taxes. It really is a tax cut for the working class and for those that are low income. Everybody's getting twice as much of a deduction. So if you make $75,000 a year, most of the time you don't do itemized. You don't itemize deductions.
Yep.
You take the standard deduction. It's $6,000 a person. It's going to be $12,000. Everybody in that range is going to get money back, more of their money back.
That's great. I think it's great that people have money for their money to spend. Have you ever been a deficit hawk or anything like that? If
Absolutely.
I looked it up, okay. But
Absolutely.
you can't say that this is like a deficit-neutral proposal. This hits the deficit
if you
in
look
big
at the
ways.
details, when the budget came up, it gave permission to give a tax cut. I also had an amendment to not only give a tax cut, but to look at spending cuts because I'm concerned about the debt. You know how many votes I got?
4.
There's only 4 people in the Senate that were willing to vote for spending cuts, but I am one of them. So I do believe that the debt is important. I continue to, every one of the spending bills that's come out since the tax cut, I continue to filibuster against them, tell them that they're not doing the right thing. And when the Republicans come forward, right now I think the Republicans are the worst on the deficit, but they're coming forward and they're saying what the president said in his speech last night, which I disagree with, that we should blow off the military sequester. The sequester was a slowdown in the rate of growth. It was caps on spending. So the Republicans are all clamoring for more military spending. But realize when I go to the Democrats and say, are you going to hold the line on military spending? They say, well, we're not really in the same place. We'll give them the military spending if they give us the welfare spending. So then all spending goes up and the deficit does explode. We're going to have $1 trillion deficit this year, and Republicans are hypocrites for complaining about Obama's deficits and then giving us $1 trillion deficits.
Well, okay, let's talk about something that apparently Republicans and Democrats can agree on, which is that both sides of the aisle say absolutely vociferously, we want to do something about DACA. We want to do something. The American people overwhelmingly, both Republicans and Democrats, overwhelmingly want to pass some legislation to allow the Dreamers to stay in the United States and give them the path to our citizenship. Why not pass a clean bill that does that?
I'm an advocate for finding a compromise. I'm also an advocate for increasing legal immigration. We need more legal immigration. It's part of how a country becomes productive, is through immigrants.
We only have 2 legal immigrants here tonight.
Immigrants are, contrary to the impression some people say, are by and large good people. The vast majority of immigrants are good people, hardworking people. I grew up in Texas.
Crime statistics are lower among immigrant populations.
I grew up in Texas. The people that I went to school with who were first generation from Mexico, hardworking people, all hardworking people. And so by and large, immigrants are good. So I will propose amendments to the bill to increase legal immigration. Because we have a lot of people here on visas, they're here legally, they still can't get their green cards after many, many years. So we do need bigger numbers on legal immigration.
What about ICE going into like courtrooms or going into hearing or custody hearings and grabbing people who are coming in for a separate reason to be dragged off?
Well, I think the one that was pointed out recently, I had a great deal of sympathy for the gentleman who'd been here 30 years, had a 15-year-old, a 12-year-old, and was married to an American citizen. I don't understand why we're sending someone like that back. He was working in our country. He was a productive citizen. So we do have to figure something out. Now, one idea that I've floated, which hasn't really been accepted by either side yet, is that we admit the DACA children, we normalize them or give them a green card, but we count them towards the totals. So it isn't normal immigration plus DACA, it's normal immigration minus DACA. So basically you'd still have 1 million, or maybe we increase that number to 1.2 million for green cards, and DACA gets some of those instead of somebody that's waiting outside the country to come. We internally immigrate people who are already here, but to please some people on the right, we count those numbers in our total immigration.
But why? That seems like semantics. They're here already. It's
Right.
not like you increase or decrease the
I know, but to
population.
normalize them and legalize them, they would have to count as they are immigrants. They're just going to be immigrated now. They didn't come in the proper way, and we're going to let them come in the proper way and get the paperwork done. And I think it is a compromise in the sense that we would admit them. They would get green cards, just like any other green card holder, but they would count towards the totals of immigration that we already have. So then the people on the right who don't want to increase immigration vastly would be, they would be counted in a process, and I think it gives a little bit to both sides.
Do you think
but the bottom line is,
sorry, go ahead.
Yes,
No,
I think there's going to be a compromise. Yes,
think so?
I would place a wager with you, but I can't That's probably illegal.
Do you think
right?
people like Goodlatte and,
Yeah.
and Cotton will allow that to happen, and the hardliners in the House?
Yeah, I think even Senator Cotton has said he's for some kind of compromise on DACA, which makes me think that we will get it.
We're way over time here, but I got to ask you. You said that the Bob Mueller investigation was a witch hunt, and that it was a distraction of Congress's time. Do you think it should be ended? Do you think he should be gotten out of there? Do you think they should get rid of Rosenstein and release the memo and just blow the
right.
whole thing up and forget it ever happened?
I'm concerned. My biggest concern is over something that Madison said in the beginning of our country. He said that men are not angels, and that's why we need more oversight of government. Our intelligence community has the ability to listen to every phone call. Every one of your phone calls could be listened to if they wanted to. Every one of your emails can be tracked. Every one of your phone, who you call and how long you speak can be tracked. Every bank transaction can be tracked. And so I think because men are not angels and women aren't either, is that there could be bias enter into the intelligence community, and we have to be very, very careful that someone gives them a check and a balance, and that check and a balance should be a judge and a warrant. So one of the things, I fought with over this collection of FISA data was that we should go to a judge to get to that. What does that have to do with Mueller? It has to, I'm concerned that we've given too much power to a prosecutor. He was supposed to go after Russian collusion. So far, he's gotten someone over. He recorded General Flynn's phone call and then got him to say something inconsistent with what was recorded in the phone call. Think about it from a personal perspective. If I had 1,000 phone calls from Stephen Colbert, what I could learn, and then if I can interview you, and if you say anything inconsistent with what you said on your private phone calls, I can put you in jail.
Well, if what
that
I
would
said,
be easy,
if what I
wouldn't it?
said in the private phone call was that, I met with the Russians over sanctions, and then you asked me, did you meet with the Russians over sanctions, and say no, then lock me up. We gotta go. I'm sorry. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Senator Rand Paul, everybody. No, don't go yet. We'll be right back. Stick around. So.